Previously on Higurashi When They Cry console arcs.
爆破？どういうこと？車に爆発物が取り付けられてたっての？
いえ、鑑識の話ではどうやら燃料系にひびが入って車内にガソリンが流れ込み、揮発したそれらに警察無線の電気コードの火花が反応して爆発したと。
That explains why it exploded once the car got radioed.
整備不良との話でしたが。
ありえない。そんなはずないわ。
Honda was smoking the whole time they were driving to the Kakuji service area. If it was actually a maintenance issue, Tomoe's car would have exploded back when they were on the highway. And what's more, could the weak electrical signal from the police radio really ignite a fire? Even if the insulated coating were peeled off, that seemed unlikely. No. Wait a minute. There was a similar case. Half a year ago, when she and Monica were heading back after a meal, and a vandal broke inside and started the car. Yeah.
それで彼は無事なの？
え？
花田くんよ。私、岐阜県警まで彼の運転で行ってきたのよ。彼から連絡なかったの？
いえ。っていうか、みないさん、花田と一緒にいたんですか？こっちの車両管理の掲示板にはみないさんのお名前しか書かれてなかったんですが。
With that, Tomoe's suspicion turned to conviction. The person who betrayed them was someone she had always relied on, Shiro Hanada.
無茶するなよ、姫さん。ここまで来ると敵はなりふり構わなくなってくるぞ。
Maeno pictured Tomoe's face, with that strong, earnest conviction that was always in her eyes, and smiled to himself. Even without her father, she was a bright woman. If possible, he wanted her to live a long life, and move ahead in the world. He clung to those selfless thoughts, excuse me.
まあ、そんなわけだから、例の件はよろしく頼むぞ。上からのストップに逆らう真似までさせて申し訳ない限りだがな。
何を今更ですよ。前野さんの秘蔵っ子なら私にとってはいや妹弟子みたいなものです。部長にもうまくねじ込んでみせますのでお気になさらず。
そうか、恩に着る。使わずに済めば万々歳だが、この分だとそうも言ってられんからな。
確かに。それと。
なんだ。
あとですね、この千葉の第二秘書が塚田って言うんですが、なかなか面白いことが分かりましたよ。
Oh?
ほう。
塚田先輩。
俺は運命って言葉が嫌いだ。自分の努力とか才能とかに頼らず、チャンスは誰かの意志で用意されるものって考え方は、ただの怠惰か意志の弱さからの言い訳だと思ってきた。だけど今は少しだけ考えを改めたい気になっている。こういう形で昔の馴染みが俺の前に立ちふさがることになるなんてな。
And then, Tsukaya slowly turned around, gazing at Tomoe with a chilling look on his face that made his earlier demeanor seem like fabrication. There was no smile, no bloodlust, nothing. A completely transparent, colorless mood was being conveyed, so Tomoe reflexively set herself on guard.
見ない。お前が刑事になっていたことも驚きだったが、まさかローウェルの一件にまで絡んでいるとはな。神様ってのはよほど性悪で、俺たちに茶番を演じさせるのが楽しくて仕方ないのかもしれない。
やはりそうなのですか？あなたは半年前に会った時にはすでにこの一件に関与していたのですか？
そうだな。かれこれ5年か。修士課程を修了して千葉先生の選挙事務所で働くようになってから、 いろいろなことに関わってきた。その中の一つがこれだよ。
塚田さん。
なあ、未来。お前はこの件から早く手を引いた方がいい。どこまで調べてもお前たちだけでは立ち向かえない。いや、この国の合法的な機関では絶対にかなわない相手だ。そんな奴らに逆らうなんて、それこそ無謀だよ。
それがあなたの正義ですか？強い者にはへつらい、弱い者を虐げる。そんな世の中を一番嫌っていたのはあなたじゃなかったのですか？
なら聞くが、お前はこの後どうするつもりだ？苦労して立ち上げた捜査本部に今回の捜査内容を報告する。そこまではいい。だがな、選挙公示前とはいえ代議士の汚職を追及し逮捕する権限は警察にはない。なぜなら警察は公安も含めて政治家には逆らえない立場に置かれているものだからな。官僚、警察、軍隊、歴史を紐解くまでもなく国家を保全するそれらの機関が民衆側に立った例はゼロと言ってもいい。法律も権力者の支配に都合よく構成されて、真面目な倫理と道徳を持つ者ほどアホを見る。民主主義なんて所詮は強者が弱者を従えるための方便。お前たちはそのための道具でしかないのさ。
そんなことはありません。私たちは公僕、この国に住む全ての人の権利と暮らしを守るための存在です。政治家の私兵集団なんかじゃない。
きれい事を言うな。何も分かっていないくせに。
Yes, she knew it. Sukata was testing her. If he turned himself into the villain, he'd be able to determine her real intentions and decide how much to say based on that.
やっぱり変わってないな。
She chuckled at the strangeness of it. The way he sought out the thoughts and sense of values in others like this was exactly the same as old times.
あなたは何をしようとしているんですか？そしてどうして私に近づいたのですか？私に疑われること、失望されることを覚悟の上で。塚田さん、あなたにとって私はまだ頼りない後輩のままかもしれない。ですが、私も生きる覚悟と責任というものをこれまでに少しは学んできたつもりです。だから、お願い、私を信じていただけませんか？
ったく。未来。
Sukata suddenly let out a huge sigh, then shook his head and turned toward Tomoe. He had a calm, bitter smile on his face, as though his earlier possession had been driven out. And the tension in the air dissipated, like a weight being lifted off her shoulders, their shoulders.
変わらないな。そこまで俺のことを信用してくれたやつは大学にもいなかったよ。もしもという言葉を許せ。もしもあの時お前と本気で付き合う勇気を持って前に踏み出していたらこんなことにはならなかったかもな。
Hey, I was just wondering that myself just a bit ago.
恨むよ、神様を。
Sukata pulled something out of his coat pocket and tossed it toward Tomoe with a snap of his wrist. She grabbed it with both hands and held it under the streetlight as she opened them. It was apparently some sort of key attached to an oval-shaped plate with numbers engraved into it.
塚田さん、これ
保険だよ。この先俺に何かがあったら使ってくれ。
何かって
お前ならわかると信じてる。なあ、見ない。
え？
血が流れずに済めばそれが一番なんだよな。俺も今はそう思うよ。見ない。まさか俺がお前を殺すとでも思ったのか？
それは
まあそう疑われても仕方ないよな。本当は俺お前の様子を伺ってくるように言われてきたんだから。
そうなんですか？
Not really surprised there.
千葉明彦は実はお前さんの存在を一番目障りだと思ってる。ある意味で恐れてもいるな。だから動向を調査して場合によっては口を封じろってな。だがあいにく俺はそんなのごめんだ。だったらせめてお前が俺に剣をして捜査自体に興味を失えばいい。そう思ってあんな風に脅しをかけちまった。ひどいことを言ってすまなかった。
いえ、それはもういいです。むしろ塚田さんが昔通りで安心しました。
なあ、見ない。俺も最後にこの運命ってやつを信じてみることにするよ。
Sakai put the key in the ignition and paused for a while, carefully choosing his words before turning toward Tomoe and giving her that answer.
正直どこまでやれるかはわからんし、お前まで巻き込んでしまって申し訳ないと思ってる。だがお前ともう一度会えたことを俺は前向きに捉えたい。
塚田さん。
ただ見ない。俺のやっていることは間違いなく悪事への加担だ。自分でも法に照らして許されるものでは決してないと立派から。その時が来たら遠慮は無用だぞ。
はい。
見ないさん、あんたはやりすぎたんですよ。気が触れておかしくなった奴らだけを取り締まってくれていればいい目くらましになってよかったんですがね。薬の存在に気づいちまったんじゃもう仕方ない。俺としてもあんたのことは結構気に入ってたんですよ。でも上からの命令です。悪く思わんでくださいな。
上って誰よ。
Hanada whistled like he was impressed by that question. Even moments before her death, this female detective was still thinking first and foremost about finding the culprit.
正直答える義務はありませんと言いたいところだが、メイドの土産だ。誰に殺されるかわからんまま死んで化けて出られるのも勘弁ですからね。そこの秘書さんがお仕えしている先生様ですよ。
While holding Sakai's body, Tomoe swam across the surface of the sea to a corner of the wharf, where thankfully she spotted a ladder that led up to the surface. And then...
塚田さん、しっかりしてください。塚田さん。
After shouting that, Tomoe's voice became very thin, and she coughed up all the water inside her throat. Then, Tomoe collapsed and completely lost consciousness. And so it continues. Greetings, my name is Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of the Higurashi When They Cry console arcs. So, Tomoe, get your butt up. We gotta go chase down that backstabbing little son of a bitch and set him on fire, because that's what he did to our parents.
Oh, Minai-san!
Eye for an eye. Don't The old-fashioned way of doing justice.
気がつかれましたか?
Fujita! How'd you find me? She could make out a white ceiling and the red light of the sunset pouring in through the window. And when she saw Fujita gazing at her with a relieved look on his face.
ここは
I see we're in the hospital. As soon as she got up, a dull pain resounded inside her head. She grimaced and took a look around at what appeared to be a hospital room. She suddenly turned her gaze downward and noticed she was dressed in a nightgown. The straps around her chest were tied in a single half-knotted bow. That was Madoka's signature style of knot, which meant she must have been the one who changed her clothes.
まどか来てるの?
ああ、昼過ぎまでずっと。まだ残ってるっておっしゃってたんですが、徹夜で疲れ気味だったので所長が俺と変わるようにって。
Such a dutiful little sister. I need to take her out and buy her something later.
そっか。
ああ、待っててください。すぐ先生を呼んできますので。
Fujita dashed out of the hospital room as soon as he finished saying that. And a short while later, he returned alongside a doctor in a white coat and a nurse.
私、どうやってここに?
まだ無理しない方がいいですよ。怪我は大したことないようですが、昨夜からずっと眠っておられたんですから。
昨夜?
While Tomoe quietly received a medical exam, memories revived in the back of her mind, causing her to gasp and take a look around. This was a private room, and Fujita was the only other one here. In which case... Oh no.
藤田君、塚田さんは?
ああ、大丈夫です。一緒に乗っておられた方も命に別状はありません。別室で眠っておられます。
そう、よかった。
When she heard about that, Tomoe held a hand against her chest and laid her upper body down again in relief. Thanks to that and the comforting softness of the pillow, she spontaneously let out a deep sigh.
異常はないようです。ただの過労でしょう。
Before long, the doctor finished the medical exam. He told Tomoe to get some rest for now, and then exited the room along with the nurse. After seeing them go, Fujita began speaking in a whisper.
ちょうど港の夜景を見に来ていたアベックが通報してくれましてね。機捜の速水さんの話では、二人折り重なるようにして倒れていたと。本当にご無事で何よりです。
ごめんね、心配かけちゃって。
車は速水さんたちが海中から引き上げてくれました。本当、運が良かったですね。
Yeah, no shit.
後部座席の左ドア以外は完全な密閉状態に細工されていましたので、それに気づかなかったらもろとも海にドボン。
運か。
It wasn't luck. Tomoe muttered that to herself while gazing up at the ceiling, recalling the moment just before she escaped the car. At the time, Tomoe was rapidly losing consciousness thanks to the alcohol injection, so she seriously thought it was all over. But at that moment, she was sure she heard a voice. Yes, it was Nagisa's voice. If that voice hadn't called out to her, Tomoe would have been too busy focusing on the brakes to think of pushing on the door in the back.
それにしても、どうして渚さんの声が?
The hallucination she heard in her drunken stupor felt so realistic. Who said it was a hallucination? And she'd never heard Nagisa talk like that before. So what on earth was that?
藤田君、なんで後部の左ドアだけ開けることができたのかしら。
さあ、それは俺にも。あ、でもあの車の鑑識そろそろ終わった頃ですから、速水さんに問い合わせれば何かがわかるかもしれません。
ならお願い。面倒をかけるけど速水さんに確認してもらえる？
そりゃまあ別に構いませんが、どうかしましたか？
ちょっとね。さて。
After saying that, Tomoe sat up and slipped her feet into the slippers on the floor. She then strengthened her wavering consciousness and held a hand against the bed as she rose to her feet.
ミナイさん、何を？
着替えるからちょっと部屋の外に出ていて。スーツはあれか。
そうじゃなくって、あなたはさっきまで意識不明だったんですよ。せめて今日一日くらいはお医者さんの言う通り安静に。
I got some revenge to dish out, boy!
ここが正念場なの。ごめん、わがまま言わせて。
ミナイさん。
Did I say revenge? I meant justice. But Tomoe continued dragging her clearly exhausted body, reaching for her suit up on the wall. Then she slapped both her cheeks with her hands to wake herself up, and raised her head.
止めるべきなのだろうか。いや。
Fujita seemed to come to an understanding while looking at Tomoe's tense expression and watching the whole scene unfold. He kept quiet and left the hospital room. No matter what happened, nobody could stop her now. After realizing that, he decided to walk down the hall, thinking about how he might get discharge permission from the doctor. Sis! For being such a diligent little sister, I'm taking you out shopping at the first opportunity. And is that a punch? Is that a dent in that little locker I see right there? Did somebody punch it? Maka was walking down the hallway, but when she saw her sister emerge from the entrance, she was so startled she nearly dropped the papers she had in hand. She was sleeplessly staying by Tomoe's side until just a little while ago. She refused Fujita's concerned request to trade places for her no matter how many times he asked. And even after Yamaoki ordered her to come back to the station, only a few hours had passed since she reluctantly acquiesced.
今日も早上がりして、お姉ちゃんの病室に泊まり込もう。
Though she was walking and thinking that, her sister was right there in front of her, standing with Fujita? Unbelievable, Maka thought as she rushed over to Tomoe.
大丈夫なの？お姉ちゃん、全然目を覚まさないから。私。
平気よ。もう血も止まったし、傷も残らないわ。
Tomoe wore a courageous smile as she said that, lifting her bangs to reveal the bandage applied there. Her injuries were mild, just as Fujita said. Even so, her face still looked pale, even in the light of the sunset, so she didn't seem healthy by any stretch. Maka's eyes were open wide as she struggled to find the words to respond. But then she noticed Fujita standing beside Tomoe, shaking his head at her, and decided to keep her mouth shut. Maka had already heard plenty of questions from Fujita and Yamaoki, asking about the identity of the passenger taken to the hospital along with her. Tomoe would be back to normal soon enough, so there was no need to say anything.
心配いらないって。あんたも元の仕事に戻りなさい。それじゃね。
あ、待ってお姉ちゃん。
Now, Tomoe, come on. You had her worried sick. You don't need to be that dismissive about the whole thing. Just as Tomoe was about to turn and leave, Maka called out to her in a strong tone, so Tomoe looked back over her shoulder to face her. And Maka thought about whether or not to say anything, before deciding to tell her about the visitor who just came to the chief's office.
今、カオルさん、山沖社長のところにお客さんが、警察庁の広報室長さんだって言ってたよ。
Oh, really?
前野さんが
Flaky himself has
失礼します。
entered the
見ない
premises,
です。
huh? Hey, Flaky! You're not leaving your dandruff all over the police precinct halls, are you?
入りたまえ。
Hearing that response from her light knock, Tomoe opened the door and stepped into the chief's office. Yamaoki was in the room, and Maeno was sitting on the sofa across from him, waiting for her. Probably flaking up the sofa as we speak.
前野室長。
よう、姫さん。ずいぶん大活躍だったそうじゃないか。
Maeno was sitting with his back toward her, and turned his head to smile at Tomoe. Realizing he was saying that sarcastically, she didn't bother to argue and just said, "I'm sorry," while deeply bowing.
具合はどうかね。
最悪です。
That differed from the answer she gave Madoka, but it wasn't Tomoe's wounds she was referring to. Fortunately, she was able to escape from the car before it plunged into the sea, but she was sleeping for a long time in the hospital. And Tsukada, who was riding along with her, still hadn't woken up. And according to Fujita, they didn't know the whereabouts of the perp who tried to murder them, Hanada. All their effort was in vain.
警察庁広報室のエリート女係長が上に連絡もなく独断行動を働き、ハリウッドスター顔負けのカーアクションをやってみせるか。ヒーロー願望もここに極まれりだな。警察官じゃなく俳優でも目指すつもりか、お前さんは。
申し訳ありません。
The biting implications behind Maeno's words was painful. She made contact with people related to the case without informing Investigation HQ, then fell into danger. Plus, a key reference person ended up hospitalized, making it impossible to question him for the time being. It was a major blunder.
にしても、まずいことになったな。
え？
Maeno picked up the tabloid sitting on the desk and handed it to Tomoe. She opened the page marked with a sticky note, and as soon as she read the headline, she cried out, her eyes open wide in astonishment.
これ、どういうことですか？
どうもこうも書かれてある通りだ。君と千葉代議士の秘書が地上の末別れ話になり、男の方が思い余って無理心中を図った。奥様方が喜んで読みそうな愛憎劇だな。
I see they're already hard at work at creating a convincing cover story in order to try to discredit us. Her thoughts were aghast as she read the text of the article. It detailed Tomoe and Tsukada's high school friendship, their junior-senior relationship at the time, and even the rumors that they were dating.
知人の証言までどういうこと？
The conniving content of the article made her want to tear it to shreds. It was as if they were prepared in advance for her to get involved in this scandal.
見ない係長。恋愛は自由だから口出しは下世話だがな。出世したいなら男はちゃんと選べよ。別れ話を切り出した途端、社会的地位も顧みずに無理心中を図るような痛いやつは、お前さんにとってマイナスにしかならん。それに相手の職業次第では、痛くもない腹を探られかねん。今後は気をつけるようにな。
そんな、違います。私と塚田さんはそんな。
事実はこの際どうでもいい。大衆にとってはここに書かれてあることが全てだ。ま、幸い不倫ではないから世間は巻き込まれた君に同情してくれるかもしれんがね。
Tomoe bit her lip as she was reminded of the circumstances that got her caught in this unexpected trap. If the enemy's goal was to cut off her activities, she should have been more careful and prepared for the possibility they'd aim for her life. But there were other, more effective ways to take her down as well. And that would be to undermine Tomoe's social status and discredit her honor.
二段構えだったとは。くそ。
You gotta hand it to him. It was actually pretty smart of them to do it like this. Just on the off chance that that one method of attack ends up failing, the other one could make up for it. In this case, if they failed to kill you, then if your credibility is torn to shreds in the eyes of the general public, then even if you somehow survived, yeah, good luck doing much of anything when you're the laughingstock of the town. Even if Tomoe's assassination failed, she'd be ostracized by society thanks to the subsequent farce, greatly diminishing her capabilities. Such a carefully laid trap was nothing short of a superhuman feat.
とりあえず不祥事というべきかは微妙なところだが、マスコミに出た以上、心証出罰だ。お前さんには今回の合同捜査本部の報道担当から外れてもらう。正式な処分が決まるまで、おとなしく自宅で休んでいるんだな。
前野さん。
何、そう悲観的に捉えるな、南井君。ただでさえここしばらく連日連夜の激務で体が参っていたんだろう。だったらこれを機会に少し休め。健全な心身を保つのも警察官としては必要な業務の一つだ。
休めなんてそんなこと。
She didn't need comfort, and she definitely didn't need rest. Sleep is for the weak! Because there was something she wanted to do. Something she had to do. We have to make a Hanada barbecue!
なあ、見ない。俺も最後に、この運命ってやつを、信じてみることにするよ。
After Sukada said that, he trusted her, and revealed his secret to her. A trust that could only be repaid by taking charge of this investigation and arresting the criminals that put them in this situation. In a sense, Tomoe had to answer his trust by demonstrating that there was still justice in this world.
塚田さんは、いいえ、塚田治は私に教えてくれました。私の追っている事件の背後には代議士の千葉明彦がいることを、そしてローウェル社の作り出した薬をめぐって危険な人体実験が行われていると教えてくれたんです。そして花田は言った。私の父はその政治家の暗躍を突き止めるために捜査していて、それを邪魔に思った奴らが母ともども殺したのだと。
巴君。
ほう。だったらお前さんはその両親の無念を晴らしたいと、そういうことか？
違います。
Tomoe leaned toward the two of them with enough momentum. It was like she was going to snap at them. She didn't intend to pursue the criminal for personal hatred or resentment. That would simply be selfish. She had a stronger, more important goal. She wanted to fulfill justice. No, she had to. Justice, bitches!
塚田さんは私に言ってくれたんです。これは敵討ちだと。彼は私の両親のことを知っていました。そのせいで私たち姉妹が人生をめちゃくちゃにされ、悲しい思いを味わったことを学生時代ずっと同情してくれていました。
It's true that her physical wounds may not have been significant. But for Tomoe, who was so hurt by the insatiable curiosity of the mass media that she saw everyone as an enemy, Sukada's sympathy was just as precious as her chance encounter with Higurashi.
そしてそのために、私たちのために人生を棒に振るような真似までして、悪事に手を染めてまで敵の正体に近づき、私の力になってくれた。だから私はそんな彼の信頼に応えなきゃいけないんです。それに報いなければ私は仁義を失います。
お前、ヤクザか。
Yakuza, you say?
仇討ちだの仁義だの。てめえの物差しで語るな、バカ野郎。そういうセンチメンタリズムで物事を考えれば、正義はただの自己満足にしかならないと何度言ったら理解できるんだ。お前さんは。
落ち着きたまえ、巴君。冷静にならずに成し遂げられるものは何もない。
After that scornful rejection from Maeno and Yamaoki's pleading, Tomoe released the hand that had been tightly gripping the back of the sofa, and took several deep breaths to get her breathing under control. Upon seeing that, Maeno stirred the cup of tea in front of him, took a sip to moisten his throat, and then continued. Yeah, I think I should probably moisten my throat a bit as well. All this reading is making my throat dry.
見ない警部。生きり立つ気持ちに水を差すようだが、多分お前さんは勘違いをしているぞ。塚田治にも少々事情があったな。彼は大学時代、とある女性と交際していたらしい。親にも挨拶して、卒業と同時に結婚する予定だったそうだ。
予定ですか。
Tomoe's eyes opened wide after hearing something she couldn't have imagined. She knew that there was another woman in Tsukai's life from that time she noticed him wearing a wedding ring. In fact, maybe it was female intuition talking, but she felt something in the atmosphere last night when they were eating and when they were walking together. But planned to? Which meant he never actually got married?
そういえば。
Maeno did mention earlier that Tomoe and Tsukai's relationship was not an affair. In other words, Tsukada had to be single. Then, what on earth happened to this other woman? Good question.
その女性の名は大沼真澄。大沼茂の一人娘だ。
大沼真澄？
おそらく君も本人のことは知らんだろうが、父親のことは聞いたことがあるはずだ。厚生省の医薬局次長、大沼茂。ローウェル事件捜査で政財官において関係者に斡旋を図っていた容疑で9年前に逮捕された官僚の一人だよ。
Wasn't he featured in one of the consul archetypes? Tsukada first met Masumi Unuma at a political research club in college. The fact that they were in the same grade and enrolled in the same department helped bring them together. But, at that time, just like in high school, Tsukada had an extremely divisive reputation. He was smart, assertive, and not bad to look at, but he mercilessly looked down on those he thought didn't put in enough effort or didn't take their studies seriously, so he wasn't an easy person to get along with. Thus, he arrogantly shied away from a great many people, but if he approached Masumi, he clearly had to have been aware of her father's connections.
マスミの方もそう思って当初は警戒し、それほど深い仲ではなかったそうだ。なんせ彼女自身も父親と同じ官僚を目指していて、それこそ猛勉強をしていたそうだからな。
Still, Tsukada was serious. And just like during his time with Tomoe, he was very reliable and had a deep affection for people who truly tried their hardest. That sincerity eventually won Masumi over, and the two of them became so close, their relationship was famous on campus. And they vowed to get married as soon as they graduated. But the two of them ultimately had to separate, shortly after Unuma was arrested with ties to the Lowell incident.
ローエル義国で逮捕された大沼は獄中で病死。もともと内臓に疾患があったらしいが、 真相は不明だ。そして世間からの風評被害で傷つき、追い詰められた娘も自宅でガス自殺。
Oh, damn.
不死家庭のせいで批判の矛先が彼女に集中して、その攻撃度合いも凄まじかったようだな。翌年に着るはずだった花嫁衣装を着て眠るように亡くなっていたそうだ。
That is incredibly depressing. Like, holy shit. Killing yourself in a wedding dress. Yeah, again, very freaking depressing. It showed just how deep her love for Sakata was. It's easy to imagine that taking away the source of her happiness caused her to hate everything. She must have talked about it with Sakata a lot, and he must have offered her all the encouragement he could, trying to cheer her up. But, even with those thoughts, she couldn't mend her broken heart. And knowing that fact must have driven him to despair and hatred.
綺麗事を言うな。何も分かっていないくせに。
She now understood the remorse and regret that fueled those vitriolic words back then. And knowing that no matter how desperately you fought, no matter how much you bet your life on it, the despair of realizing that someone dear to you would never come back was something she herself had experienced.
それにしても塚田も大した玉だな。学生時代は非常に打算的。付き合う相手も自分にとって有用かどうかで決めるような性格だった。とは一人の惚れた相手のために全てを投げ捨てて戦うか。そんな情熱的なやつだったのか、彼は。
ええ。批判も誤解も、それ以上に敵の多い人でしたが、理想と信念を持った人でした。
Madoka never thought well of him, but the Tsukada that Tomoe knew was a very kind person. But because he was so devoted to his ideals and beliefs, he was very hard on himself and others, and treated people coldly when he disagreed with their values. It was sure to give an off-putting impression. He was very talented, so he failed to recognize the existence of less talented individuals, and he really believed that everyone could achieve the results they deserved as long as they put in the necessary effort. He was a very pure and, in a sense, unfortunate person.
それでも
He was always a kind person, making an effort to look out for people like Tomoe who continue to work hard at things like track and field. So, maybe that was the reason Masumi Onuma was drawn to him. Why she loved him.
女一人のために一生涯をかけるか。
It didn't seem like that was Tsukada's ambition, but it felt appropriate. He wasn't a man to cut corners at anything, especially not someone he cared deeply about. He was probably wearing that wedding ring to show a sincere desire to remember her even after her death. You're making me sad. She felt a hint of regret that she wasn't the target of that affection, but that felt a little selfish and greedy of her. For Sakata, and for Tomoe too, they were just a thing of the past.
とにかく、お前さんはしばらく謹慎だ。反論が許される状況でないことは理解しておけ。
はい。
悪い話ばかりじゃないさ。患者の承諾なしに未認可薬、それも以前に使用を禁止されたものを大手の病院が扱っていたなんて話は決して許されることじゃない。現在の合同捜査本部も人員を増強して引き続き調査に当たることになっている。お前さんの後任もちゃんと信用できるやつを選んでやるさ。
Yes, that's something.
最後まで関わりたかったというのはやはりわがままなんでしょうね。
気持ちはよくわかるつもりだ。だがとりあえず今は休め。見ない警部。これからもやってもらいたいことが山ほどあるんだ。ここがついの場所でお前さんは満足なのか？よくやったよ、お前さんは。俺も山沖さんもそれはよくわかっているつもりだ。
After saying that, Maeno got up from the sofa and gave Tomoe a stern pat on her drooping shoulders. She timidly looked up to see Maeno nodding at her, not his usual slanted smile, but with a strong, sincere, fearless smile.
敵は大臣クラスだ。今まで想定していた規模では対処しきれなくなる。そのための俺たちで、そしてお前さんは十分すぎることの基礎固めをしてくれた。だからあとは信じて手を引け。いいな。
はい。
Tomoe answered affirmatively, then gave him a salute and left the room. And then, as soon as the tension dissipated, she felt the fatigue course all through her shoulders. Maka had been waiting at the front of the chief's office, and she immediately hugged her sister when she saw her staggering out of the room. She nearly collapsed from the momentum, but thankfully Fujita was next to them and able to hold her up.
みないさん。
ちょっとしっかりしてお姉ちゃん。
どうしました？
寝てる。
Just as Maka had said, Tomoe had fallen into a deep slumber, while still standing up. Fujita, Madoka, I need one of you to offer me your bosom for me to use as a pillow. After seeing Tomoe off, Maeno turned toward Yamaoki and shrugged his shoulders.
こんなものでよかったですかね。
すまんな。わざわざ来てもらった上に悪役まで引き受けてもらって。
まあおそらくじっとしていないと思いますが、少しはブレーキになったでしょう。私もこんなことで優秀な部下を失いたくはありませんからね。
Maeno sat down on the sofa as he said that, and offered Yamaoki a cigarette. He pulled out a lighter and lit it, then lit another one for himself.
しかしよくも一日程度でここまでの記事を書かせたものだな。さすがにメディア捜査はお手の物か。
まあね。捜査本部から懲戒の形で外れるとなれば、少なくとも姫さんを殺す意味がなくなる。連中もやりすぎて反撃を食らうのは嫌でしょうからね。それに実際にはこの手のスキャンダルなんて、彼女のキャリアにとって課金にもなりませんよ。
Maeno grinned and had a sharp, challenging glint in his eyes as he adjusted his glasses. Tomoe herself was unaware of this, but the NPA Public Relations Office also had a shadow intelligence department under Maeno's command that went all the way up to the Commissioner's Secretariat. Considering the social influences on criminal investigation, controlling the information released to the public can be an effective deterrent against would-be criminals and underground investigations. Information warfare, huh? The fog of war, so to speak. This is possible because the position of Media Information Management Authority was directly delegated by the director of the National Police Agency. Until now, they've been able to halt the flow of information with a single request, or vice versa. In that sense, it is very easy to disseminate rumor-level information through the press and portray it as the truth, which made them an even more powerful police organization than public security.
それに、 真相を知れば彼女は激怒するでしょうが、今回の事件は塚田の自宅を家宅捜索する令状を取るためにももってこいの理由付けでしたから。有意義に使わせてもらったおかげで、彼の管理していた千葉大義士の裏帳簿のいくつかをサルベージできて上々です。まあ、あとは地検特捜部の頑張り次第ってところですか。
So, does that mean they're gonna arrest him soon?
守備は期待できそうなのか？
正直、名古屋地検さんの反応を聞く限りは五分五分ですね。
A literal coin toss, then.
悪くはないが決め手にかける。あれだと秘書が勝手にやったことと簡単に切り捨てられるだけです。国会の諮問でも責任追及までいけるかどうか。もうすぐ総選挙が始まりますから、うやむやにされる可能性が高そうです。
The contents of the secret ledgers they seized were at best documenting donations and campaign expenses. Certainly proof of legal dealings, but not something particularly unusual for a politician. Ideally, they wanted to find something showing him acting as an intermediary with relevant businesses and government offices during his days as a cabinet minister, but unfortunately that wasn't the case.
千葉の第一秘書を務めていた小山が先年急性心不全で死んで、その後彼の所有していた書類を引き継いだのが塚田です。ということは、まだ彼の手元には発見されていない資料が他にも残っているはずなんです。それをどこに隠しているのか突き止めるため、現在も捜査中です。と言っても、警察が汚職関連で動き回れる範囲なんてたかが知れていますが。
そのあたりは地検の連中が我々の後を引き継いで、どれだけ真面目に動いてくれるかだな。ローエル義国で煮え湯を飲まされたグループが上の圧力を逃れて立ち上がってくれれば勝算はあるのだがね。
難しいでしょうね。当時よりも千葉の影響力は大きくて、警察の上層部にさえ様々なコネを持っています。ローエルの時は外事的な陰謀ありということで公安も味方できましたが、その本質は国益の防衛ですから、今回の場合は政治家の保全を優先する側に回るでしょう。
Maintaining the status quo at all costs, even if that also means preserving the corruption within it, huh? Lovely system you guys got.
自分もその出身だけに想像がつきます。と、山沖さんもそうでしたね。
しかも検事総長は確か奥野長官の後輩だったな。よくできたものだ。
Quite. This incident was likely to be pinned on another scapegoat. A medical institution will be caught distributing prohibited drugs without patient consent, and the people involved will be arrested. It might be a pain point for Okuno and Chiba's alphabet project, but at least it would control the spread of information and keep the details of the research secret. And then the truth will be buried in darkness, as Chiba runs away with huge sums of cash lining his pockets. Yamaoki couldn't help but feel remorse, thinking it was hopeless to do anything against Koizumi's flunkies.
でも逃がしませんよ。俺もギリギリ、でかい石のバカ野郎どもに目に物見せてやりますよ。
前野君。
確かに千葉を挙げる前に地検特捜部は諦めちまうんでしょう。公安も秋山からの話では、すでに引退して何の権限もないじいさんに責任を全部押し付けて、そいつを見せしめにするのが関の山だと。でももう奴にこれ以上死の証人気取りはさせません。何年がかりになってでも、ローウェルとのパイプを外交筋からぶった切ってやります。絶対にね。
そんなに意気込んで大丈夫かね。政治家に喧嘩を売って無事で済んだ例はあまり聞かないぞ。
それがどうしたですよ。 やれるものならやってみればいい。ただし姫さんと違ってそれ相応の見返りは受けてもらいますけどね。
Maeno's eyes were heating up and turning red, but when Yamaoki started feeling suspicious of his violent reaction, he suddenly spoke up.
笑ってもらって構いませんが、俺は運命だと勝手に思っています。
運命？
未来さんが追っていた事件の謎をその娘がこじ開けた。運命があるのならこれ以上のものはない。だから俺は自分のキャリアをこれにつぎ込むつもりです。なに、どうせダメでも気楽な独り身だ。すべて終わった後は田舎の駐在所で一生過ごすのも悪くないと思っています。
なるほどな。
Yamaoki completely understood his enthusiasm, because for Maeno, Tomoe's father, Yusuke Minai was his first boss and a mentor. That hierarchy was quickly reversed thanks to the nature of the career group, but he looked up to Minai so much that he continued speaking to him with an utmost respectful tone, even after attaining a higher rank than him. They were a perfect match for one another. After all, Maeno had an especially prideful and irreverent personality back then, but he always calmly listened to what Minai had to say. But then...
白樺山荘、今でも覚えています。突入の時、俺は犯人に足を打ち抜かれて、もう少しで頭もやられるところだった。
And in came charging Minai, like a raging bull.
未来さんが命令を無視して懲戒免職覚悟で相手を撃ってくれていなかったら、俺は今の階級を墓の下で受け取っていたと思います。
Maeno had a distinct look in his eyes as he stamped his cigarette butt down on the ashtray. When Yamaoki squinted his eyes, Maeno's form overlapped with that of another person. 12 years had passed since Yusuke Minai's death. The two of them were getting up there in age. Their ranks had risen and they transferred to different workplaces. But they had one thing in common. The remorse they felt back then, when upper management forced them to abandon an investigation even though their friend was murdered.
すんません。すんません。すんません。
The sound of Maeno kneeling down in front of Yusuke Minai's grave, spilling tears while apologizing non-stop, still lingered in Yamaoki's ears. Yamaoki himself wanted to cry just as much as Maeno, but as the head of an organization, he felt an obligation to maintain a minimum level of dignity. He may have even envied Maeno's position at the time, for being able to release his passion as he saw fit.
ならば結局君も復讐かね、前野君。
復讐？いや、ちょっと違いますね。どちらかといえばキャリア組としてのプライドの証明ですよ。そして俺はそれを果たすがために、こうして出世して権力を握ったのだと勝手に思っています。
Maeno shrugged his shoulders, then bitterly smiled as he continued.
山脇さん、昔言ってましたよね。自分の信じる正義を貫きたいのなら出世しろと。どれだけ正しくて納得のいく意見や発言であろうとも、日本の偉い人は肩書きと実績のない人間に対して耳を傾けることはほとんどない。
ああ、そうだったな。
It was back when he was on the team pursuing the truth of the Lowell incident, when orders came down from upper management to suspend the investigation. Maeno was the youngest among them and the most passionate about arresting the culprit who killed his old boss, and shortly afterwards he was forced to transfer out public security.
あの時あなたのその言葉を聞いていなかったら、俺は警察を辞めていたと思います。そして社会正義とやらに絶望して、ひょっとしたら反体制運動にでも走っていたのかもしれない。
そういう意味では君も実に純粋なやつだったな。今もそれほど変わるわけでもないが。
ただその言葉を聞いたおかげで、こうやって広報室の権力を拡大させていろんなことができるようになった。だからあなたには本当に感謝しています。でもね、山沖さん。俺は最近あなたの言葉とは違う、もう一つの役割があるんじゃないかなって思うようになったんです。
ほう。
俺たちが偉くなるのは、自分の正義を貫くためじゃない。正義を馬鹿正直に信じている若い奴らが、その信念に従って無茶ができるように、そのために俺たちは今の地位についたんじゃないかなって。いわば踏み台ですよ。俺たちロートルは。俺はここに来るまで、あなたたちのような年長者に支えられ、守られて偉くなった。その役目を今度は俺がやる番なんですよ。
前の
裏方に回ってサポートに徹し、いざという時には若い連中の代わりにこの首を差し出して、奴らの責任を引き受ける。そうすることで奴らは遠慮なく正義を信じて、時には危険を冒してでも悪に立ち向かっていけるんじゃないんですかね。
なるほどな。
俺たちはね、事実がどうであれ、部下己の正義を貫くことこそが警察の本分で、それが誰かの都合で歪められるかもしれないなんて思わせちゃいけないんです。奴らは自分たちの行動が国家のため、ひいては大衆のためだと信じて命を懸けている。なのにその規範を示す立場にいる俺たちが上の意向で右往左往していたら、奴らにどうやって警察の職務に責任と覚悟を持てなんて言えますか。
Police bureaucrats are like officers in the military. They send direct detectives to the scene of dangerous incidents and make every effort to apprehend the criminals. That comes with its fair share of bloodshed. Sometimes lives are even lost. Nevertheless, the upper ranks legitimize their actions and give them pride in their contributions by demonstrating justice. Maeno believed that his role was to have the boldness and preparedness to follow these soldiers.
しかし千葉といえば与党の実力者だ。今度は君が攻撃対象になるぞ。
その点についてはご心配なくです。もうすぐ衆議院選挙が近いので、野党の上役の何人かを口説いて外堀を埋める準備をしています。彼らにとっては与党を攻撃する好材料だ。それに与党の連中の中にも13年前に起きた過半数割れの恐怖を覚えているのが大勢います。ですからもう少し突っ込んで致命的なネタをつかめば、奴らは千葉さえも切りますよ。
そのためにもあと一押しだな。
ええ、捜査本部の方もとりあえず私が面倒を見ますのでご安心を。岐阜県警にも長官官房の偉い人たちから圧力をかけてもらうつもりです。あと今村派にも接触を図りますよ。
今村派？今村洋平にか。
Hearing Maeno speak of such an unexpected name, Yamaoki looked back at him with a sharp gaze. Yuhei Imamura, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and head of the current opposition faction in politics. He was suspected of involvement in the Lowell scandal 9 years ago because his son-in-law was one of the bureaucrats arrested, so at the moment he had lost some power.
連中にしてみれば、現政権の実権を握る奥の千葉を追い落とす絶好の機会ですからね。この餌にはきっと食いつく。いや、絶対に興味を示してくるはずです。派閥争いに手を貸すようであまりいい気分ではありませんが、敵の敵は味方というわけです。与党総ぐるみで千葉を囲われる前に内部を切り崩す。ここまで来ればこちらも手段は選びませんよ。
なるほどな。それにしてもローウェル義国で一番被害を被った連中が今度は同じネタで敵対勢力に逆襲するか。皮肉というかむしろ喜劇だな。
ですね。連中にとっても可愛い子飼いの弔い合戦だ。 しかも自分たちの勢力を巻き返す絶好の機会。運命はよこしまな意志に対して痛烈なしっぺ返しを食らわせると言いますが、まさにその通りというやつですね。
運命か。
As Yamaoki muttered that to himself, he suddenly had a thought. He had always believed that fate was the will of the gods. In a sense, he saw it as something beyond human ability. But he finally realized that was wrong. No, it was demonstrated to him. Yes, destiny can be moved and reshaped by the hands of human will. And without a doubt, the reason he was seeing this current development was because of Tomoe and Maeno's strong beliefs and her courage to never give up.
あの子の願いを叶えてやるつもりが逆になっていたというわけか。
With a bitter smile, a feeling of happiness in the sense that he was not alone floated to his face. A weak, unreliable baby bird had grown into a woman strong enough to inherit her father's will. And she's been energizing Maeno and the other men around her, inspiring them to tackle the challenges before them. Yamaoki had once given up on it, but the ideal form was certainly there.
まあそれにしても。
何か心配事でもあるのか。
はあ、いえ。捜査本部の堂島さんは話がわかる人だからまあいいとして、問題は大内です。科警研と観光庁との人材交流で一時厚生省に出向していたことがある。しかも相馬と違って小心者で出世欲が人一倍強いやつですから、つまらないことを考えなきゃいいんですけど。
That anxiety would eventually come to fruition in a very unexpected manner. Oh, how so?
で、またまた1週間の謹慎ですか。何度も言うけどほんとバカじゃないの？
うっさい。
Tomoe discontentedly uttered that as Monica carefully helped her stuff investigation materials from one of the First Division's desks into a cardboard box. She thought about smacking her across the head with one of the files in hand, but decided against it because Fujita was quietly organizing materials nearby. Afraid, and from a safe distance. Yeah, you better fear me, you little bitch!
ったく、あんまり懲戒重ねると出世もそうだけどお給料減っちゃうよ。ボーナスも年金だって。お姉ちゃんの年くらいだとマイホーム持ってる人もいるんじゃなかった？
いいのよ、私は。東京にも竹内にも長居するつもりはないんだから。いざとなったら茨城に移ればいいんだし。
あ、お姉ちゃん知らないの？おばあちゃん来年になったら古くなったあの家壊して駐車場にする気らしいよ。
Are you fucking shitting me with this shit? I hate stories like this.
で、自分は貯めたお金で賃貸マンションに住むんだって。
何それ、聞いてないわよ。せめて改築すればいいじゃない。
もう何でも好きな人ができたからその人のそばで一緒に住みたいんだって。
A Twilight romance, huh?
すごいよね。80過ぎなのに新しい恋に生きるなんて。ちょっとは見習ったら？
In below the belt, aren't you, little sis? Keep that up and I won't take you shopping after all. With no suitable retort, Tomoe took the file in her hands and slammed it down inside the cardboard box. Then she sealed it with duct tape, set up another box, and resumed filing it.
にしても恋人発覚の前にスキャンダルなんて、いかにもお姉ちゃんらしいといえばらしいよね。そう思いませんか、藤田さん？
いいや。
Don't drag me into this, Fujita muttered to himself. But Tomoe glanced at him and suddenly felt something wicked, then spoke up.
こうなったら 今度新聞記者から取材あった時に言ってやろうかな。私には他に好きな人がいます。その人は部下だけど私と同い年で。
Oh, don't do that, Tomoe. His wife would kill him.
やめてください、未来さん。そんな嘘デタラメが新聞記事になんかなったりしたら、俺間違いなく優子に殺されます。
I believe that's her intention.
冗談よ。そこまで嫌がらなくてもいいじゃない。
Of course, she had no romantic feelings for Fujita, but it would be completely boring to outright reject the notion. That being said, his wife was famous all across the police station for being a jealous monster. And Tomoe herself had been on the receiving end of that fury once before, so she understood that particular aspect of his dread. Well, I mean, hey, look on the plus side. At least you can probably trust that she actually genuinely likes him, or at least his wallet.
それより、未来さんにまどかさん、喉乾きませんか？俺ちょっとなんか買ってきますんで。
Then, Fujita dashed out of the room like a startled rabbit, without even waiting for a reply. It happened so fast, Tomoe and Maka were left stunned. The two of them looked at one another, then burst out laughing out of nowhere. And then...
でもまあ、お姉ちゃんはすごいよ。
あ？何言って。
Thinking that was a sarcastic provocation, Tomoe turned and glared at Madoka. But she had a calm, gentle smile on her face as she gazed at Tomoe, and then continued.
あれだけみんなが無理だ、わかるはずがないって諦めてた事件の真相、ついにたどり着いちゃうんだもの。合同捜査本部に参加してる刑事さんたち、みんなお姉ちゃんのことを褒めてたよ。若いとか女だとか言って、その人の実力は判断できないってね。今だから言うけど、私ね、警察官になんて本当はなりたくなかった。正直お姉ちゃんほどお父さんとお母さんの事件に一生懸命になれなかったし、それに危ないのに全然報われない仕事だなって思ってたんだ。でも
One day, while Maka was working at the cabaret club, Yamaoki happened to visit as a customer. He looked at Maka's face and asked her a sincere question.
君、以前どこかで会ったことはないか？
何ですかそれ。そういうナンパのやり方、もう古すぎますよ。
She wore a business smile on her face, while sighing deep in her heart. She was sick of dirty middle-aged men using those sorts of lines. She'd like to think that he had a little more sense in that. However...
あ、いや、私は君とよく似た子の面倒を見ていてな。名前を見ない巴というんだが、聞いたことはないかね？
When Maka heard that, she immediately dropped the mutter she was using to stir the whiskey. She ran away from her sister to avoid being such a bother for her. Plus, even when Tomoe came looking for her, Maka made a declaration that she was on her own, and turned away. Nevertheless, Maka still hadn't forgotten her sister. Considering how many years it's been, she had probably graduated and gotten a job around now. But she was still living a depressing life, being beaten down day by day. In the long stretch of time that they hadn't seen one another, only bad thoughts ran through her head, sometimes even creeping into her dreams. With that in mind, Maka completely forgot about her job, and then leaned forward.
お姉 姉ちゃんのお知り合いなんですか？私、妹のまどかです。
そうか、やはりな。祐介には娘が2人いると聞いていたが、君が妹さんか。
Surprisingly enough, Yamaoki was also acquainted with Maka's parents. In fact, he was her father's boss. So that meant he was a fellow police officer?
お姉ちゃん、元気ですか？今、どうしているか、実は、よく知らなくて。
ああ、元気にやっているよ。今は茨城県警の少年係に勤めていてな。同僚や上役たちからもなかなかの評判だ。
お姉ちゃんが、警察官に？
Maka was a little surprised to hear that. Sure, her father was a police officer, but her sister saw how busy he always was, and how he never got time off, so she always said she wasn't interested in joining the police force. But somehow, seeing Tomoe as a police officer felt appropriate. Plus, as a female officer in the youth division, she could provide encouragement for young boys and girls, just like she used to. How funny. It was somehow amusing and nostalgic. She began to cry, and couldn't stop. Yamaoki gazed at Maka with a gentle look in his eyes. After that, Yamaoki visited the club at least once a week and always requested Madoka. And every time, he'd give her an update about Tomoe. Apparently, during those meetings, she came to learn that he was someone Tomoe could rely on. And as Tomoe's superior, Maka was able to inquire into the details of her work. Then, she gradually started meeting up with him outside of work, to eat and chat. Maka felt sincerity in Yamaoki, unlike any other man she'd ever met, and began taking more of an interest in him. And one day...
え？警官ですか？
ああ、そうだ。実は今度、私は警察署長に異動することになった。愛知県の柿内市というところなんだが、静かで交通の便も良く、君の自宅周りよりもずっと住みやすい町だ。よかったら君も、一緒に来ないかと思ってな。
それって、プロポーズですか？
ああ、いや、なんというか。
You okay there, Chief? Need someone to perform the Heimlich maneuver on you? Thump you in the back? Feeling embarrassed, Yamaoki drank his whiskey on the rocks in one gulp. It must have gotten caught in his throat because he started coughing. Seeing that, Maka had a hard time holding back a burst of laughter. Maka understood that Yamaoki was concerned about their age difference. For him, she was the daughter of a former subordinate, so when they walked side by side, they looked more like a parent and child rather than a pair of lovers. Well, it looks like, well, it's more than that, but I mean, I think I've already talked about that particular image before. That awkwardness sometimes presented itself, but no matter what the world had to say, deep in Maka's heart, she had already decided.
でも、だからってどうして私が警官なんですか？別に専業主婦でも家政婦でも私喜んでやりますよ。
まどか君は巴君のことをどう思っている？
お姉ちゃんのことですか？
There was no need to even ask, and the question seemed somehow unrelated to the topic at hand, so Maka quizzically tilted her head. She loved her sister. She respected her. Even though they argued and had a falling out, she considered her an ideal woman, even now. Does that include her eating habits too, Madoka? But on the other hand, Madoka...
もちろん好きですよ。 向こうはどう思っているのかわかんないけど、本当は私、お姉ちゃんのこと、世界で一番尊敬しています。
やはりな。なんとなくで勝手なことを言うのもなんなんだが、君は巴君に対して随分引け目を持っているように思えてね。彼女とうまくいっていないのもおそらくそのあたりが理由といったところではないか。
そんなこと。
君がお姉さんに悪いことをしてという意味じゃない。彼女がとても優秀で自分よりも才能に恵まれていることに劣等感があって、それが何事にも斜に構える思考につながっているような気がするのだ。
Maka couldn't say anything otherwise, so she silently poured some more whiskey into Yamoki's empty glass. It was just as Yamoki said, so she couldn't laugh it off or gloss over it. Her sister was exceptionally well studied and had a pleasant personality. But Madoka, on the other hand, had no strong education or any meaningful merits in her background. Even though she tried her best in her own erratic way, she never accomplished anything.
同じ親から生まれたというのに、この違いは何だろう。
The absurdity and injustice of it all was frustrating. So at some point, Maka stopped bothering to try her best, and even started to hate it. No matter how hard she tried, she'd never surpass her sister. Once she recognized that fact, she fully realized that she simply lacked the capability. Rather than enduring that pain, it's far easier if you simply don't bother trying hard from the start. The truth is, she could do it. But telling herself that killed her motivation.
惨めだとは分かってるんだ。
Nevertheless, anytime she stood beside her sister, she started to feel distant. It was a vicious cycle of ever-increasing self-loathing. Allowing Tomoe to go on living her life freely was really just an excuse. She just didn't want to hate herself and her beloved sister by demonstrating a growing difference between the two of them.
せめて私がお姉ちゃんに勝てるもの一つでもあったらよかったんですけどね。大好きな姉が優秀なのは妹にとってはとっても誇らしいけど。
なるほどな。だがそう思ったからこそ私は君もお姉さんと一緒のことをやってみてはどうかと思ったのだ。
え？
Maka tilted her head, unable to grasp what Yamoki was getting at. She left her sister behind because she didn't want the miserable experience of constantly being compared with her. And yet, he suggested she go into the same profession as her and compete against her abilities?
カオルさん、からかってます？こういう冗談は私、怒りますよ。
からかってもいないし冗談でもない。それが君自身のコンプレックスを取り除くのに一番の方法だと私は思ったのだがね。
だいたい勝負なんて最初から見えてるじゃないですか。お姉ちゃんは優秀な選抜組で、私は今からだったら平巡査からのスタート。仕事をこなす量も質も桁違いで惨めになるだけです。
果たしてそうかな。君は巴君の成し遂げた結果だけを見てそう言っているだけではないのかね。巴君は実はとても失敗の多い子だ。衝突や挫折も山ほど経験して上司や関係各所に怒られる回数はおそらく同期の中でも一番多い。不器用で頑固でそのくせ脇が甘くて身長差が足りない。それが私の彼女に対しての評価だ。
ちょっとカオルさん、何ですかそれは。
Maka glared at Yamoki as she reproached him, upset that he'd say something so awful. But the look on his face showed no malice or aversion toward Tomoe. In fact, there was even heartwarming kindness in there.
今の君と巴君、何が違うと思う？才能か、それとも環境か。
それは。
いや違う。そしてそれを知るには、彼女と同じ目線に立ってみることが一番だと私は思う。本当に才能と環境でお姉さんが今の居場所を築いたのか、よく見てみるといい。なあに、警官一人くらいの人事、私の力で何とかしてみせる。あとはまどか君、君の気持ち次第だ。
それで私、ここの警官の採用試験を受けて警察官になったの。あとはお姉ちゃんにそのことを報告してお祝いしてもらって、ついでにカオルさんのことを白状して大喧嘩になったところまでは説明しなくてもいいよね。
そうだったの。
At last, the doubts Tomoe had been holding back all this time finally thawed, and she was convinced. She knew perfectly well that Maka didn't like their father's job as a police officer. Days off weren't just infrequent, they were practically non-existent. And sometimes he'd get injured bad enough to need hospitalization. So even when Maka was young, he never had a positive perception of being a police officer. But despite that, she became an officer anyway. And now is the reason why.
でも、同じ警察に入ってよくわかった。お姉ちゃんは、やっぱり偉いよ。叶わないとか、無理とか、そんな引け目を持った漠然とした感想じゃない。自分が失敗したこと、思ったようにならなかったことと、しっかり向き合って、反省して、どうすれば次に活かせるかを悩んで、苦しんで、それでも、前に進もうとする。それが、私とお姉ちゃんとの大きな違いなんだね。
Maka had the attitude that if she failed, she'd just give up. But Tomoe would stand back up and keep trying again and again until she succeeded. She simply had the courage, the persistence, and the dedication to do so. Of course, there may have also been some underlying talent beneath that, but the biggest gulf between them was how seriously Tomoe applied herself.
私は自分がお姉ちゃんに劣ってるってずっと思ってきた。だから何をしてもどうせお姉ちゃんほどのことはできないって勝手に諦めてた。私はここまでで、これ以上はどんなに努力してもどんなに願っても無駄だって。自分に向き合って可能性を考えることをしなかった。でもそれって私、
そんなこと。
だからね、私これからはもっと自分に対して真面目に向き合ってみる。一生懸命を笑わずに、挫折や失敗を怖がらずにね。そしてその結果がお姉ちゃんとか他の人に比べてどうだって考え方はもうしない。自分のために、そして自分の大切なもののために最大限の努力ができたか、それだ。
まどか。
まあ私はお姉ちゃんほどのガッツもないから、またどこかでつまずいちゃうかもしれないけどね。でも何度でもうまくいくまで諦めずにやってみる。私そう決めたんだ。
Learning how her sister felt, Tomoe suddenly felt an overwhelming rush of emotion. She was delighted to just hear her say that, and she was happy that she had come to such a heartfelt decision. However, it wasn't just that. She wasn't the only one working hard towards something.
私もね、まどか。あんたがいなかったら、ここまでなれなかったと思う。
え？私が？
お互い様なのよ。あんたは私にとって何よりも大切な妹だった。だから、あんたのためなら何でもできる。それが私の支えだったの。
Tomoe also knew how much Madoka respected her. That's why she hated betraying her beloved sister's expectations. There were so many times she'd endured hardship and wanted to give up. Countless times where she considered that it might be better if she yielded. However, she always asked herself, if I gave up here, what would Madoka think? She'd be sad, discouraged. Just imagining her face brought Tomoe dread. So, if she didn't have Madoka, if she didn't have a little sister who always believed she was amazing, she could never have come as far as she did. Those were undoubtedly Tomoe's true feelings.
私のことずっと支えてくれていたのよ。あんたは自覚してなかったんだろうけど。ありがとうね、まどか。そして、これからもよろしくね。
お姉ちゃん。
さあ、無駄話はこれくらいにして。さっさと資料整理しないと、地検の特捜部の人たちもうすぐ来るわよ。
うん、そうだね。
You know what, Madoka? After this heartfelt discussion, I think I'll get you 2 gifts instead of just 1. You did a lot to cheer me up. After saying that, they resumed packing the documents. In this room, they had the drug analysis results prepared by Suma, and the ledgers and materials seized from Sukada's home, which they had been working all night to prepare copies of. The originals were to be kept at Joint Investigation HQ, packed away in the records room, behind the conference room.
他に漏れているものはないわね。じゃあ残りは。
Tomoe muttered that to herself while opening a drawer to the assistant director's cabinet. Then she looked inside to see if anything was forgotten, and she suddenly stopped on one particular file.
これ。
It was a file full of carefully separated notebook pages, stored in individual plastic bags. These were the investigation records that Yusuke Minai left behind before his death.
いよいよ八方塞がりか。ごめん、父さん。
Regrets hounded Tomoe as she opened the file her father left behind. On the last page, the text, Kakushi Airport, June, Wednesday, go, was written in black ink.
あれ、そのノート何？
これはね。
あ、お父さんの字だね。柿内空港6月水曜。いや、CI かな。
Huh? As Maka looked at the file from the side, those words leaked out. Her nonchalant voice pierced Tomoe's ears and stimulated her eardrums. And then Tomoe's consciousness wavered, as if time itself had stopped.
ちょっと待って。
What? What's the C1 or CL mean? What does that mean?
C1 って、これ、そう読めるの？
だって、この癖書きは間違いなく C だよ。お父さんってアルファベット書くのがものすごく下手だったからさ。
You gotta be shitting me. There was a big fucking clue staring us right in the face the whole fucking time, and Tomoe couldn't recognize it because she couldn't remember some particular oddities of her dad's handwriting? Fucking what?
じゃあこれはひらがなの毛に見えるけど。
LT それとも LX
Tomoe froze on the spot like she'd been struck by a bolt of lightning, then looked through the notes. After hearing it, yes, this really did look like her father's poor attempt at writing alphabetic characters.
そうだ。そうだったんだ。
She'd always assumed it was written in hiragana, which it likely meant go, and she was desperately trying to think of what he might have meant by that. But now she finally realized her perspective was far too narrow, that she had stopped thinking. And then, what do they use alphabetic letters to denote at Kakuchi Airport?
これ、ひょっとしてレターコード？え？何それ？レターコードってのは空港名または航空会社名を表すアルファ、そして2文字表記は大抵航空会社名を指す。 C1 は確かセントラル第一航空、そして LX はロベルタ航空のことよ。
へえ、さすがスチュワーデスに憧れてたお姉ちゃん。詳しいね。
But she could no longer even hear Monika's teasing. And then, when she noticed Fuchida coming back after buying a couple of cans of juice, Tomoe rushed at him, seemingly in a fit of anger.
藤田君、ちょっと。
なんでしょう、ミナイさん。
お願い、大至急セントラル第一航空とロベルタ航空のことを調べて。過去20、いえ30年間の活動記録を。
どうしたの急に。それにロベルタ航空なんてもうないよ。どこかの航空会社と合併したって前ニュースで見たもの。
どこと合併したの？
ああ、それなら俺知ってます。セントラル第一航空と合併して今はセントラル航空って名前になっていますよ。
セントラル航空？
That name was something she'd heard recently. But where? Where on earth did she hear it? Tomoe racked her brain, desperately trying to remember the significance of that name. And that moment.
藤田君、その合併っていつ？
俺が大学の受験勉強をしていた時ですから12年ほど前ですね。確かその時参考書を読みながらラジオで聞いた記憶がありますから多分合ってます。
よく知ってますね、藤田さん。そんなに有名な航空会社なんですか？
いやー、俺実は航空ショーとかが結構好きで、欧米のアクロバットチームが使う機材とかの運搬を引き受けているのがセントラル航空なんですよ。確かパンフにも協賛って形で書かれていたと思います。
なるほど。そしてそのショーは毎年6月柿内空港で行われる。
It connected. Connection after connection after connection. It was all connected!
まどか、藤田君。
ミナイさん。
ちょっとお姉ちゃん、一体どうしたのよ。
あんたたち最高、最高よ。
She hugged her two bewildered onlookers while laughing at the top of her lungs for the first time in a long time. Maka and Fuchida just nervously looked down at her as she did. Just then, the phone began to ring. By the second ring, Maka realized there was nobody else around, so she broke out of Tomoe's embrace and went to answer the phone.
はい、こちら刑事一課。はい、
どうしたの？
お姉ちゃんに来客だって。東京地検の特捜部の人。
Oh? Anyway, I feel like I should be grasping the connection here, but I'm kind of lost on the significance of all this. So, if you could explain this all to me within the next 5 to 10 minutes, that'd be great. Despite the sunny weather, a man parted the bangs from his forehead that was so sweaty it seemed drenched by rain, as he rushed to the to the floor of the First Division. Then, with a fearless, challenging smile, he pulled a business card from his inside pocket and handed it to Tomoe.
お初にお目にかかります。東京地検特捜部の反町です。
どうも、はじめまして。
After lightly bowing her head, Tomoe glanced at the title on the business card. Chief Public Prosecutor. He seemed a little older than her, probably mid-30s. His physique was neat enough to look like a model, and he seemed a little vain. But she could tell from the sharp look in his eyes that he was a good man.
だけど。
Something about the name Tokyo District Prosecutor's Office made Tomoe uncomfortable. There should have been someone from Nagoya DPO appointed here. There was no reason to dispatch someone from a completely different department in Tokyo, and it was even more odd that they sent a single person in advance. You're not a hitman, are you? The badge looked real. But who was this so-called prosecutor Sorimachi?
警察庁広報室所属、報道担当警部の見内です。ご用件は？
なあ、その前に、ちょっと失礼します。
After saying that, Sorimachi took off his suit jacket. His shirt was wet enough for his skin to show through. The smell of sweat came overflowing through the damp air, and Maka, who was standing beside her, made no attempt to hide the grimace on her face.
いや、すみません。ちょっとタクシーの冷房が壊れてたもんで、暑くって。にしても、ここって結構市街から離れていますね。不便じゃありませんか？
東京のようにあっちこっち電車や地下鉄が走っているわけではないので。失礼ですが、今日来られる予定の？
いやいや、全くのアポなし飛び込みです。数時間前に新幹線に飛び乗ってタクシー飛ばして飯ですが、どうやら間に合ったようですね。
アポがない。それってどういう？
Her words were interrupted by the ringing desk phone. Since Maka was nearby, she went to answer it after the first ring. However, as soon as she heard the caller's name, she shouted, "Huh?" and then immediately pressed the hold button and turned to Tomoe.
お姉ちゃん、名古屋地検の特捜部の人から3番だけど。
Tomoe looked confused and turned towards Sorimachi, but he had a slight smile on his face and held his hand up as he said, "Please go ahead." Tomoe had no choice but to lift the handset and press the flashing button number 3. Before she could even say a word, the caller identified himself as a Nagoya district prosecutor.
途中の道が混んでいたために遅れましたが、我々はあと30分ほどでそちらに到着できそうです。資料のご準備の方はいかがでしょうか？
ええ。こちらも今、県警と署の捜査員が総がかりになって準備しておりますので、到着された頃にはあまりお待たせすることなくお渡しできるかと思います。目録も添付しておりますので、そちらをご覧いただけましたら幸いです。
そうですか、ありがとうございます。今回の捜査令状は私の方で持参しておりますが、それをどちらにお渡しすればよろしいか教えていただけますか？
署の第一会議室で県警捜査一課の堂島課長が指揮を執っております。その者が今回の責任者なので、彼にご提出ください。
了解しました。それでは。
After confirming that the caller had hung up, Tomoe sat down in the receiver. Then, she turned back to Sorimachi, who had pulled out a fan at some point to cool himself off.
東京地検の方とおっしゃいましたね。
So he claims.
令状はお持ちでしょうか？
ありません。
はい？
いや、実はあなた方が有力な情報をつかんだことをほんの数時間前に知りまして、そのため令状を裁判所に請求している暇もありませんでした。はあ
That brazen attitude made Fujita cry out in shock. Without a warrant, they had no obligation to submit investigation materials, and could even refuse requests. So it's common sense among the police force to only hand over necessary materials after being presented legally binding proof. And yet this man didn't have that? He's ballsy, I'll give him that. Tomoe was feeling more and more suspicious of Sorimachi, and she was starting to regret letting him in without vetting him properly.
令状をお持ちでなければお役所的な対応で申し訳ありませんが、その提示をいただいた上で資料の引き渡しを行わせていただきます。これも規則ですのでご理解ください。
まあそうお答えになるだろうとは思っておりました。ですがこれはどちらかというとあなた方のご好意に頼った。よって私のことが信用できないとおっしゃるようであれば、お断りになられても仕方ないと覚悟しております。
はあ。
Then Tomoe seriously considered declining him immediately, but she thought it would be a pity to do that to someone who came all the way here from Tokyo, so Tomoe blinked and gave him a vague answer. Even so, no matter what this guy's title may be, how could she trust someone enough to hand over investigation materials when he suddenly shows up unannounced and without a warrant? Personally, I think it'd be a suicidally stupid idea to do that.
そもそもどうして東京地検のあなたが私たちの捜査情報をお知りになったのですか？
名古屋地検にも我々のアンテナ役が何人かおりましてね。その中の一人が今回の上司の意向に対して賛同できないと言ってこちらに情報を垂れ込んでくれたわけです。
それならば名古屋地検を通じて資料をご覧になるべきじゃないでしょうか。今回我々は名古屋さんからの協力要請を受けて資料をご提供するのです。それを横取りするようにライン外の東京地検さんが出張ってくるのはまるで派閥争いというか仲間割れのようにしか見えませんよ。
Fujita's suspicions hit his limit, so he interrupted the two of them to reproach Sorimachi. On the other hand, Sorimachi gave him an affirming nod as he pulled up in an empty chair and sat down.
おっしゃる通り、同じ検察庁同士で手柄争いをしている。それにこのことが露見すれば名古屋さんから抗議が来るかもしれない。だがそうも言っていられない都合がこちらにもありましてね。無茶を承知で割り込ませていただいたわけです。
その都合とは一体何ですか？差し支えなければ教えていただけるとありがたいです。
Yeah, please do.
名古屋地検から来る連中、千葉の紐付きですよ。
Sorimachi suddenly dropped his voice as he said that, causing Tomoe and the others to gasp and open their eyes wide. Then his smile vanished and he looked around the room. First at Fujita, then at Madoka, then back to Tomoe and gave her a signal.
この二人は信用できるのか。そういうことか。
Tomoe picked up on Sorimachi's implication and gave him a firm nod. After receiving that, he leaned forward and continued.
もうあまり時間もないので腹を割ってお話しします。どうやらあなた方は検察の連中に資料を渡してあとはお任せする心づもりなのかもしれません。しかし名古屋にはもう千葉の息のかかった奴らの手が回っています。
Of course he does.
ですからあなたたちは資料のコピーを渡して原本は残しておきたいとお考えでしょうが、連中は上の命令を盾にしてそれも回収するつもりです。それこそ根こそぎでね。それに名古屋さんは適度なラインで事を収める気でいます。残念ですがあなた方が期待する結果にはならないでしょう。
適度なラインということは千葉の逮捕までいかないってことですか？
そうです。あなた方が確保した秘書の塚田、それに問題のありそうな企業と観光庁の担当者を何人か挙げてそれが彼らの妥協点でしょう。薬事法違反の絡みで厚生省の麻薬取締部の動きも気になりますが、聞いたところによると現状 有力な証拠をつかむまでには至っていないようですから、そして親玉への追及は政治的な判断で見送られる予定です。
そんな。
まさかというお気持ちはよくわかります。私だって検事だ。身内の信用を貶めるようなことは言いたくない。ただはっきり言ってこの一件に関わる黒幕連中はそんじょそこらの犯罪グループなんかとは規模も力も違う。追及を逃れるためならルールブックを書き換えてしまうことさえやってのけますよ。
That's a truly absolutely insane amount of power for anybody to wield in any system of government. Nobody should have that kind of power. Tomoe was stunned as she listened to Sorimachi's explanation, but at the same time, she reconsidered her thoughts. No matter how rotten Akihito Chiba may be, he's still a big-name politician who served as the Minister of Health and Welfare. It would take more than half-hearted idealism to take him down.
今回、あなた方が塚田の自宅から押収した資料からは、おそらくですが、その献金ルートをたどって全てを暴くと、それこそ医薬業界が大パニックに陥ります。どこまでが政治献金で、どこからが賄賂なのかの境目が非常に不明確な現状では、犯罪の基準点が見出しにくいからです。
In general, pharmaceutical companies in Japan are required to get approval before they can sell newly developed drugs, and the approval process is handled by the Pharmaceutical Affairs Council within the Ministry of Health and Welfare. Companies often pay incentives to doctors, hospitals, and council members who cooperate during the data collection phase. Strictly speaking, that's a bribe. So much like the construction industry, the pharmaceutical industry is commonly regarded as a field rife with undisclosed expenditures.
実際、過去のローウェル事件の顛末がそれを証明しています。当時、清廉を謳った首相の指示で、地検特捜部やらが徹底的に業界内へメスを入れて責任追及を行ったのですが、結果、贈収賄を行ったとして逮捕された者は数十人規模になってしまいましたからね。
Presidents, executives, university professors, ministry deputy directors, and other managers who couldn't be easily replaced were arrested one after another. Some of these companies went bankrupt or shut down as a result. Additionally, people were shocked to learn that the Ministry of Health and Welfare and a leading pharmaceutical company had gotten caught in a scandal, which heightened public distrust of medicine and contributed as a subsequent economic downturn. On top of that, medical researchers and other industry officials started weighing more emphasis on their well-being so they can become reluctant to develop new drugs or cooperate with others in doing so. Thus, it could be said that the Japanese pharmaceutical industry had stalled since the Lowell incident and had fallen 20 years behind compared to other developed countries.
結局、一番損をしたのは病に苦しんで治療おかしな話です。
そうですね。
When she thought about that contradiction, she felt her conviction wavering. The absurdity of doing the right thing but ultimately hurting weaker, more vulnerable people was something Tomoe couldn't accept.
そして現在、政財官において偉くなってる連中は、ローウェル義国の悪影響に苦しんだ奴らばかりです。だからもし、その過去の事例を挙げて、今回の未認可薬の問題で騒ぎが大きくなれば、同様に副作用的な影響が出てしまうと千葉がそう言って閣僚たちあるいは厚生省の幹部を巧みに説得したとすればどうなります？
There was no need to answer. They wanted to revive the sinking pharmaceutical industry, so they do everything they could to downplay the case in order to reduce the impact of the aftermath. Thinking about it, she could see it happening. The district prosecutor would limit the bribery charges to Secretary Sukada, and then close the investigation before it could be linked back to any hospitals involved in the transactions. That way, the social impact could be kept under control, and the case of these dangerous drugs would come to an end. And as a result, Chiba himself would be able to evade pursuit.
ある程度は予想していたつもりでしたが、やはりそうなりますか。
状況はよくありません。それに今はまだ総選挙の公示前ですが、いざそれが始まれば代議士である千葉に対しては逮捕どころか調書すらまともに取れなくなる。ですから今しかない。チャンスは本当にあと数日なんです。
Make it or break it time, huh? Indeed, the House of Representatives general election was coming up soon. Once that process got going, the district prosecutor's office wouldn't be able to investigate the candidates even if they wanted to. In other words, if she truly wanted to expose Chiba's wrongdoings, there was barely any time left. Dojima and the other folks at Investigation HQ understood that, and that's why they pressured Nagoya DPO to come here today.
あれ?
When Tomoe heard that, she suddenly noticed something. After everything she heard, arresting Chiba sounded extremely difficult. But Sorimachi was still suggesting it was a possibility. In other words, he understood the social impact this would have, but was still willing to arrest Chiba without stooping to the appeasement mentioned earlier. And because of that, she could definitely understand why it would be better to hand these records over to Tokyo DPO instead of Nagoya DPO. But she didn't understand his motive for taking such a risk to pursue Chiba.
わかりません。社会的不安は煽ることになると分かっていながら、あえて東京地検さんが千葉を逮捕しようとなさるのはなぜですか。あなた方の上層部もできれば影響をミニマムに捉えたいと考えるのが自然だと思いますが。
ええ、おそらく上はね。実際ローウェル社の捜査も千葉明彦に対しての追及もやりすぎだと偉い。ただ俺たちはそれが我慢ならんのですよ。不正を明らかに働いているのを目にしておきながら、もっともらしい後付けの理屈で見逃そうとするその根性がね。
Maybe Sorimachi's throat had gone dry from all the talking, because he started lightly coughing right then. When Tomoe saw that, she grabbed one of Fujita's cans of coffee and held it out to him.
ああ、どうも。まあ、それはともかくとして、俺たちはローウェル社の件をはじめ、莫大な国費を浪費して収賄につぎ込んだアルファベットプロジェクトにまつわる不正の数々を調べれば調べるほど笑いましたよ。その研究会ではもっともらしい綺麗な建前を振りかざしていましたが、実は単なる連中の懐を超え太らせていくだけのものだったわけで、そんな土下座どもに一泡吹かせてやりたくて、俺たちはここ何年もの間心血を注いできたんです。
After saying that, Sorimachi swiftly took a drink from his can of coffee, then squeezed his hands so tight his nails dug into the can. He was carefully choosing his words to avoid leaking information, but the tone alone was enough to convey his heated emotions.
頭は悪くない。それにまんざら嘘をついているわけでもなさそうだ。
Though Tomoe's facial expression hadn't changed, Sorimachi still felt a slight something in her response. He let the name of the Alphabet Project slip out because he wanted to see how much they'd been able to grasp thus far. And he was starting to think that this female chief inspector, who he originally thought was nothing more than a clerk, was actually someone he could rely on.
なるほど。このお嬢さんは知っているな。
He was prepared from the start to die on the battlefield here, and intended to launch an assault regardless of the odds. So he was willing to bluff it. He was willing to bluff it. It would allow him to snatch victory. And Sorimachi came to Kakuji Station running on those broken feelings. But this girl understood the circumstances and could be convinced to help. With that in mind, he decided to continue.
アルファベットプロジェクトを動かしている連中は強大な富と権力を欲しいままにして悪辣な事業に手を染めている。このままだとさらに数多くの犠牲者が出て、それこそ汚染の範囲は国内全域にまで広がっていくでしょう。確かにローウェル事件の時のような衝撃を再び起こすのは危険ですが、だったらプロジェクト自身をぶっ潰してしまえばいい。それを実現するためにも中心人物である千葉の逮捕が必要。
確かにそうですね。
Yeah, we gotta remove this, we gotta cut out this cancer so the rest of the body can be saved. Tomoe pulled a tab on her can of coffee as she voiced her agreement. The tension was suffocating and her throat felt dry.
みないさん。
お姉ちゃん。
Meanwhile, Fujita and Madoka were behind her, turning her to her with inquisitive looks in their eyes. Tomoe noticed them, of course, but she held up a hand and said later, then turned back towards Sorimachi. She felt sorry that they were feeling left behind, but at the moment she couldn't afford to waste any time stopping to explain the situation to them.
しかし反町さん、今回の捜査資料が不正を改善するためにどれほどの効果をもたらすものか、正直言って未知数なのです。ですから気分を害されるかもしれませんが、あなた自身の勝手な独断で妙な期待を持ってこちらにいらっしゃったのなら、いささか勇み足かと私にはそう感じられます。
ほう。
またあまりに大手術になると逆に患者自身の体を傷つけ、命も危険に陥ることになる。そう思って軟着陸を試みようとするのは検察庁のお偉いさん。国家の安定を第一に考える立場の人間としては当然の理屈だと思います。
本心で言っているとは思えませんね。
Sorimachi's gaze became even sharper, and he looked straight at Tomoe. Time was running out, so he couldn't afford to squander another moment. He spoke in a voice like a swinging sword.
この国は上に行けば行くほどいびつで事なかれ主義が強くなります。だから大手術に耐えきれないと分かったらすぐ傷口を閉じてなかったことにしてしまう。それで患者自身の生命力が衰え、やがて朽ち果ててもリスクを負って万一失敗した時、その責めを一身に浴びることの方を嫌い恐れる。
おっしゃる通りです。
ただその体自身が政治家本人のものだったら、それは個人の選択で自由な権利だ。だがこの場合体ってのはこの国で、その所有者は国民なんです。そして我々検事は彼らから税金をもらって今の地位について汚職や不正を取り締まる職務を負っている。なのにその俺たちがその国民の利益よりも好き勝手に振る舞う政治家連中のへりくつと建前を守るなんて、まるで犯罪者と警察が共謀するようなものじゃないですか。
Basically, yes.
俺はそれが一番納得できないんです。
Such an awful story, intentionally overlooking wrongdoing just because of their major side effects. Even when you realize absolute integrity is only an ideal, justice dies when you permit the darkness a foothold. In that sense, Sorimachi seemed like a man with a lot of self-respect and responsibility for his duties. And he seemed to have a strong conviction in every word he said, so she got a good feeling from him.
だけどどうする？
If Nagoya DPO really is what Sorimachi says it is, then she needs to cooperate with Tokyo DPO to catch the mastermind behind this incident. But, to borrow Sorimachi's words, there was a great deal of risk in accepting his request here. Could she really set that aside and trust this man? Tomoe was still hesitating to come to a decision.
と 時間もないのに脱線してすみません。で、いかがです？
あなたのお考えはよくわかります。ですが、だからといってあなたが信用に足る方だという証拠はどこにあります？単にあなたの暴走で思いついたことに振り回されるというのであれば、これほどの道化はありません。
Tomoe looked down at the business card that Sorimachi had given her. He had more backbone than she first thought, and he did make a good impression. But whether that was enough for her to trust him was another matter entirely. Plus, there was still a chance that the Nagoya DPO would take it seriously and pursue the culprit, and the Sorimachi guy could very well be all bark and no bite. Or worse, he could be an enemy agent, here to steal the resources Tomoe and her colleagues obtained.
それに、こんな名刺一つで正式な令状を持つ彼らよりもあなたに任せろとでも言うのですか？我々もこの資料を作り上げるために、それこそ血を流すような思いを重ねて、たくさんの人たちに力添えをしてもらってきた。そんな彼らに対して私も責任があります。
無茶を言っているのは承知の上です。残念ながら正式な証拠も、あなた方が信用できる材料を集めている暇もなく、ただ先ほども申し上げました通り、時間がない、こう話しているだけでもすでに10分。連中が到着するまであと20分だ。奴らは名古屋さんに全て持ち帰らせて、もう大丈夫だと油断するでしょう。そこが最大のチャンスなんです。
Cloudy white handprints emerged on the glass surface of the desk that Sorimachi rested his hands on. His impatience and desperation were clear as day.
ですが反町さん、あなたもこっち側の人間ならば、ルールを破ることのリスクと信用を証明することの難しさを知っているはずです。だったら。
分かっている。だが彼らがやってくれば、ここにある資料は根こそぎ持っていかれる。そして全ての証拠を持ち去られてしまったら、我々にはもう手出しができなくなる。本当に正念場なんですよ、警部さん。政治家や代議士に対しての逮捕権を持っていないあなたたちなら、持っていても仕方のない資料だ。特に惜しくもないかもしれない。それでも我々にとっては決戦兵器にも等しい代物なんだ。
Sorimachi's desperate appeal had Tomoe's heart racing. What should she do? Just as he said, there was no time to waste feeling lost. Even now, there was probably barely enough time to copy and transport the materials. I'm gonna go with my gut instinct and trust this man. Give him the materials. But on what grounds could she trust him? It was just recently that she was betrayed by her subordinate, Hanada, who she thought was trustworthy. With that in mind, she was doubting her judgment, and couldn't bring herself to say yes or no. At the very least, if there was some evidence that could support her decision, she'd be willing to accept that responsibility and take that step.
頼みます、書き打ち所の警部さん。今からでも責任者にこのことをつないで口利きをして、もっと。
Oh? What'd you just say? That moment, Sorimachi bowed down so deeply that his suit jacket slipped out of his hands. When Tomoe saw that, she reflexively bent down to catch it, but she accidentally grabbed it from the bottom, so his wallet spilled out from his pocket.
すみません。え?
What's in the wallet? As Tomoe apologized, she suddenly dropped her gaze downward and noticed the twofold wallet spread open on the floor, and her eyes stopped on the photo inside. What she saw there was a little boy and a little girl, surrounded by greenery and with innocent smiles on their faces.
ああ、すみません。興奮してつい。
この子は？
ああ、私の息子です。いや、お恥ずかしい。
After grabbing the suit from Tomoe, Sorimachi somewhat timidly reached for his wallet while scratching his head. And here I was thinking it was something sinister. But Tomoe picked it up before he could get to it and stared at it.
この顔、どこかで。
Of course, she'd never seen Sorimachi's son before. But the girl holding up a peace sign beside him felt like someone she'd seen recently. But where? Where on earth did she meet that girl? She remembered. It was when she went to meet Uushi at Okinomiya Station. There was a girl stretching her arm out in front of the vending machine, struggling to insert a 100 yen coin. Oh, I see now. And as proof of that, she could clearly see the red spherical hair ornament on the girl's head in the photo. Which means this girl is...
確か、みゆきちゃん?
Yeah!
ひょっとしてあなた、赤坂と知り合いなんですか?
Hearing Tomoe mutter that name, Sorimachi looked up in surprise. And when he responded immediately with the name Akasaka, she knew for certain that her recollection was correct.
反町さん、失礼ですが、赤坂さんとはどういった関係なんですか？
ええ、大学時代の後輩でね。よく家族込みでキャンプに行くんで、これはその時に撮った写真なんですよ。
それだけで？
Sorimachi answered her, feeling a little frustrated that they were having small talk at a time like this. But when he realized how seriously Tomoe was listening to his words, he was quickly able to pick up on where his conversation was going. Were the two of them just acquaintances? Or did the two of them have a deeply trusting relationship? That's what she was trying to find out here.
ならば。
He didn't know how well acquainted this chief inspector was with his sworn brother. Nonetheless, Sorimachi decided to gamble on those odds and started talking about Akasaka, hoping it would be enough to win her trust.
わかりました。赤坂が公安だってことは、すでにご存知ですよね。奴は現在外事系、特に国内企業が開発した技術や、その情報の流出を防ぐことをメインに行っています。いわゆる、産業スパイの活動抑止と、その取り締まりです。今回、アルファベットプロジェクトで開発された情報が海外に流出しているとの疑いがかかったことを受けて、外資系企業が関わると彼の出番ですからね。ただあいにく、最近になって公安がこの件から手を引いてしまったので、今は。
では、赤坂さんに身元証明を取り付けることはできませんか？
今は無理です。彼は現在休暇中なので、おそらく今頃は家族旅行に出ているはずです。和倉温泉がその行き先と聞いていましたが。
She thought back. Indeed, when she met Akasaka at Okinomiya Station, he mentioned that a major case he was investigating had been suspended, so he was using that time for a family vacation.
和倉温泉に行く途中に立ち寄らせていただきました。お元気ですか、大石さ
ん。And Akasaka said that.
残念ですよ。私としてはぜひとも捕まえたかったんですがね。
まあまあ、赤坂さんでも無理だったのなら他の誰にもできませんでしたよ。
Now this is quite the Chekhov's gun moment that we've got set up here, huh?
元気出してほら。
The stories really did match up. At the time, Ushi said that Akasaka was an excellent detective. He even encouraged Tomoe to be a detective like him. This man named Akasaka was a capable enough detective to win that old man's trust and respect. And the prosecutor standing in front of her was close enough to him to be like family, and was even collaborating with him on an investigation until just recently.
藤田君、それとまどか。
はい。
何、お姉ちゃん。
こっち側の段ボール箱を全部大至急で地下のメールセンターに運んで。反町さん、送付先の住所はこちらの名刺のものでよろしいですか？
はい。稲荷さん、いいんですか？これってあなたの。
責任は私が取る。悪いけど言う通りにしてくれる？
Tomoe turned toward them as she said that, then repeated it to encourage her bewildered colleagues. Maka sensed something in her sister's expression, then nodded back to her and began setting up the handcart that was leaning against the wall nearby.
わかりました、南井警部。ほら、藤田さん手伝って。あと10分しかないのよ。
はい。これ全部ですね。よっと。
Then, once all the cardboard boxes were loaded onto the cart, Fujita pushed it out of the room with Maka's help. After seeing them off, Tomoe turned back to Sorimachi, who was stunned by this sudden development. Then she smiled and spoke up.
今2人が運び出した段ボールに入っている資料は残っているこれらのコピーです。私が広報用の資料にして後で整理するつもりで預かっていたものなのですが、薬の成分を分析した予備資料も含めてそのまま東京地検に郵送します。印刷している時間はもうありませんので。
本当によろしいんですか？押しかけておいてなんですが、資料を丸ごと渡していただけるなんて。
Sorimachi came here thinking they'd at best provide him copies of a portion of the material, so he was extremely surprised to hear Tomoe was offering him all of it. He too understood just how valuable this material was. And not to mention, she may not be able to avoid formal reprimand for releasing this material to outside parties. There certainly was a huge risk, and she was still feeling a little hesitant. This would be very hard to explain to the public relations director and the police secretary later on. And if she allowed Sorimachi to carry the documents out of here, then he lost them. Or worse, if he disposed of them, then Tomoe truly would have lost everything.
だけど
Tomoe believed. She decided she wanted to believe.
必要分の複写が済み次第、警察庁広報室に返送してください。私はあなたを信じます。だからどうか役立てていただけますか？
警部さん。
私はたくさんの人たちに支えられて今日まで捜査に当たってきました。自分一人が勝手な理想の中に生きることなく、他の人々もそれぞれに正義を持って生きていることを信じて、その心に訴えかけて、だからどうかあなたのことも信じさせてください。お願いします。
わかりました。こんな俺を信頼してくれて本当に感謝します。あなたの見る目が正しかったことをしっかりと証明してみせますよ。
Sorimachi-sen said that with a smile so big it was about to fly off his face, then deeply bowed to Tomoe. If this really is something Chiba was afraid of us recovering, then we might actually be able to win this. No, we'll definitely win. With those powerful feelings in mind, Sorimachi held out his hand. Tomoe reciprocated and gave him a very firm handshake.
では、私はこれで。ことは一刻を争いますので。
すみません。近くの駅までお送りしますので。無駄足になるかもしれませんが、お手伝いいただきたいことがあるんです。
As she said that, Tomoe reached into her pocket and pulled something out, then held it up to Sorimachi. Sukada had given it to her just a few days ago. It was a key with a number tag attached. Well, holy shit. This is quite a lot of stuff to take in. We're limited on time, and we're now taking a huge gamble with this Sorimachi fellow. But I have a sneaking suspicion it will pay off for us in the end. But in the meantime, though, I'm quite anxious to see what will happen next. Because once Nagia catches wind of this, I'm sure that Chiba's lackeys will in turn also catch wind of this, report back to Chiba, and Chiba will get desperate and resort to drastic measures. So, yeah, there's no way I can't see things escalating even further than they already have. So things could get pretty messy. I'm anxious as hell and excited to see what happens next. But for now, I think I'm going to go ahead and cut things off here. So, I hope all of you who tuned in enjoyed this latest episode of the Higurashi When They Cry console arcs. If you did, and you'd like to see more content from me, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all next time. Take care.